Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most explosive developments in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, a massive strike on the Crimea bridge and the intense response now unfolding from Moscow. The bridge, a critical symbol of Russia's hold over Crimea, has once again become the center of global attention after a devastating attack that sent shockwaves across the region. As videos of the explosion spread across social media, questions are rising about what this means for the future of the war, for Russia's military posture, and for Ukraine's strategy moving forward. The Crimea Bridge, also known as the Kerch Bridge, has been a vital link connecting mainland Russia to the Crimean Peninsula since its completion in 2018. It's not just a piece of infrastructure, it's a political and military statement. For Russia, it symbolizes the permanence of its annexation of Crimea. For Ukraine, it's a constant reminder of lost territory and a legitimate military target. This latest strike marks yet another bold move, signaling that Ukraine's campaign to weaken Russian logistics and morale is far from over. Reports suggest the explosion occurred in the early hours of the morning, shaking the structure and halting all traffic across the bridge. Eyewitnesses described massive plumes of smoke, fire spreading along the roadway, and a deafening sound that echoed for miles. Satellite images later confirmed significant damage to both the road and rail sections. Initial Russian statements tried to downplay the event, labeling it a terrorist attack, but insisting the damage was limited. However, independent footage tells a different story. Large portions of the bridge appear to have collapsed into the sea. This is not the first time the Crimea Bridge has been struck. In previous incidents, Ukraine's special forces and maritime drones have successfully targeted it, demonstrating an impressive level of planning and precision. Each attack has served as both a tactical blow and a psychological message. Hitting the bridge means cutting off a major supply line for Russian forces in southern Ukraine, but it also humiliates the Kremlin. The bridge was one of Vladimir Putin's personal pet projects, and any successful strike against it strikes directly at his image of control and power. In Moscow, the reaction has been swift and furious. Russian state media is in overdrive, broadcasting images of emergency crews working on the wreckage, and calling for decisive retribution. President Putin held an emergency meeting with his top security officials, vowing that the perpetrators would face severe consequences. Within hours, reports began to surface of missile strikes hitting Ukrainian cities, including Odessa, Mykolaiv, and Dnipro. The Russian Defense Ministry framed these attacks as retaliatory measures, targeting what they claimed were Ukrainian military facilities. However, eyewitness accounts suggest that many of the missiles struck civilian infrastructure instead. The timing of this strike is particularly significant. As winter approaches, both sides are preparing for a new phase of the war. Ukraine has been ramping up its long-range strike capabilities, with Western-supplied weapons like Storm Shadow and ATACMS missiles giving it the ability to hit deep behind enemy lines. By targeting the Crimea Bridge again, Ukraine appears to be sending a clear signal: Crimea is not safe, and Russia's grip on the peninsula is loosening. At the same time, this incident raises major questions about the effectiveness of Russia's air defenses. The bridge is one of the most heavily guarded structures in the country, protected by radar systems, surface-to-air missiles, and naval patrols. Yet somehow, Ukraine managed to penetrate this shield again. Military analysts are pointing to the use of innovative tactics, possibly involving sea drones or hybrid strikes combining aerial and naval assets. Whatever the method, the message is clear: Ukraine's ability to strike critical targets inside occupied territory is growing. For ordinary Russians, the attack has reignited fears of vulnerability. The Kremlin has long portrayed the war as something distant, happening far from home. But repeated strikes on Crimea challenge that illusion. On social media, Russians posted videos showing long lines of cars stranded near the damaged bridge, desperate to escape. Meanwhile, tourism in Crimea, once a proud symbol of Russia's return to the peninsula, has collapsed. Many residents are now questioning whether Moscow can truly protect them. Ukraine, on the other hand, has remained deliberately ambiguous. While officials have not directly claimed responsibility, several statements from Kiev suggest satisfaction with the outcome. Ukrainian intelligence representatives hinted that the bridge has no place on occupied land, and that it will continue to be a target until Crimea is free. President Zelensky, in a late-night address, stopped short of confirming Ukraine's role but praised those who bring justice to our land and waters. This kind of calculated silence allows Ukraine to maintain plausible deniability while keeping the psychological pressure on Russia. The global reaction has been mixed. Western governments have largely refrained from commenting directly on the strike, though many officials have quietly acknowledged Ukraine's right to target military infrastructure supporting Russia's occupation. NATO representatives emphasized that Ukraine has the right to defend itself and disrupt enemy supply lines. However, some diplomats worry that escalating attacks on Crimea could push Moscow to intensify its own retaliatory strikes, potentially widening the conflict further. From an analytical perspective, this strike represents a key turning point in the conflict. The Crimea Bridge is not just a physical target, it's a symbol of Russian permanence in Crimea. By successfully damaging it again, Ukraine demonstrates that Russian control is not absolute. Every attack undermines the perception of stability, forcing Russia to divert resources to repair and defense rather than advancing its frontline positions. For Kiev, this is a strategic victory that amplifies its leverage both militarily and diplomatically. Still, the risk of escalation is very real. Russia's immediate response has been to launch waves of missile and drone attacks across Ukraine, including against energy infrastructure. These strikes are intended to punish civilians and exhaust Ukraine's air defenses. Yet they also reveal a pattern. Each Ukrainian success leads to indiscriminate Russian retaliation, which in turn deepens global sympathy for Ukraine and strengthens international support. It's a cycle that Moscow struggles to control. Inside Russia, nationalist voices are growing louder, demanding harsher actions and even the declaration of martial law in parts of the country. Prominent military bloggers have openly criticized the defense ministry for its failure to protect the bridge. This internal dissent is becoming increasingly difficult for the Kremlin to suppress. Every successful Ukrainian strike chips away at the myth of Russian invincibility, exposing weaknesses in leadership, logistics, and morale. Meanwhile, Ukrainian morale has surged. Images of the damaged bridge circulating online have been celebrated as a symbol of defiance and hope. For many Ukrainians, the bridge represents the heart of occupation, and every explosion on it feels like justice. As one Ukrainian commentator put it, each strike brings Crimea one step closer to coming home. The symbolism here cannot be overstated. This isn't just about territory, it's about identity, resilience, and the will to fight back against overwhelming odds. Economically, the strike also carries huge consequences. The Crimea Bridge is essential for transporting goods, fuel, and military supplies to Russian forces stationed in southern Ukraine. With the bridge disrupted, Russia is forced to rely more heavily on vulnerable ferry routes and land corridors through occupied territories. This creates logistical bottlenecks that could slow down resupply operations, particularly as winter weather sets in. For Ukraine, this is part of a broader strategy to weaken Russia not just through direct combat, but by systematically undermining its ability to sustain the war. Internationally, the latest attack has renewed debate about Crimea's future. Western analysts now believe that Ukraine's long-term objective is to isolate Crimea completely, making it impossible for Russia to maintain its forces there. This could pave the way for a larger offensive in 2025 aimed at reclaiming key areas near the peninsula. Whether that's realistic remains to be seen, but what's clear is that Ukraine is no longer treating Crimea as untouchable. The psychological line has been crossed. As Russia ramps up its response, the question now is how far it's willing to go. Putin's rhetoric has grown increasingly aggressive, warning that any further attacks on Russian territory will be met with unprecedented consequences. Some analysts interpret this as a threat of escalation, perhaps even renewed nuclear posturing, while others see it as bluster aimed at maintaining domestic control. Either way, the stakes are higher than ever. Behind the scenes, intelligence sources suggest that both sides are preparing for a brutal winter phase. Ukraine will likely continue to target Russian logistics hubs, airfields, and command centers in Crimea and occupied areas. Russia, in turn, is expected to double down on attacks aimed at crippling Ukraine's energy grid, hoping to break civilian morale. It's a grim strategy that underscores the human cost of this war, one measured not just in territory, but in lives disrupted and lost. The attack on the Crimea Bridge also sends a message far beyond the battlefield. It shows that technology and innovation can level the playing field against a larger adversary. Ukraine's use of maritime drones and precision-guided weapons has rewritten the rules of modern warfare. Small, agile, and relatively inexpensive tools have been able to inflict massive damage on a superpower's infrastructure. This shift is forcing military analysts worldwide to rethink how future conflicts will be fought. As this story develops, the situation remains fluid. Russia's retaliation has only just begun, and Ukraine's next move is uncertain. But one thing is clear: the bridge that once symbolized Russian dominance now represents its vulnerability. Each strike chips away at Moscow's sense of security and control, reminding the world that even the mightiest powers can be shaken. For those watching this conflict from afar, it's easy to focus on explosions and headlines. But behind every strike are deeper layers of strategy, emotion, and human resilience. The war in Ukraine is not just about land or politics, it's about the enduring fight for freedom and the right to self-determination. The attack on the Crimea bridge is another chapter in that ongoing struggle, one that continues to reshape the map of Europe and redefine global geopolitics. As night falls over the Black Sea, the fires on the damaged bridge continue to burn, casting a haunting glow that can be seen for miles. For some, it's a symbol of destruction; for others, it's a beacon of hope. The world watches closely as both nations brace for what comes next. Russia's response has only just begun, but so too has Ukraine's determination to reclaim what it believes is rightfully its own. The road ahead will be long and perilous, but this moment, this strike, will be remembered as a defining point in the war's history. And that's where we stand today, on the edge of another escalation, watching history unfold in real time. What happens next will depend not just on missiles and drones, but on endurance, strategy, and the will of millions on both sides. Thank you for watching, and make sure to stay tuned as we continue to follow this evolving story and its global impact.